story begins with Keller, who recites the Lord's Prayer before his son shoots a deer in the woods. Proud of his son's precision, Keller praises him as they drive home, reflecting on lessons from his own father. Later, Keller, his wife Grace, their son Ralph, and daughter Anna head to their friend's home for Thanksgiving. And along the way, Ralph tells him about his summer savings, but Keller can't help him with it because he's still struggling to keep up with the mortgage. Ralph suggests renting out his granddad's warehouse, and Grace chuckles as Keller reveals it'll cost a fortune to prepare it for leasing. Not long after, Nancy and Franklin, along with their daughters Eliza and Joy, welcome them warmly. As the adults prepare dinner, Anna and Joy play outside under Ralph's watchful eye, and Eliza, who also tagged along. They notice a strange RV parked nearby, but Ralph ignores Anna's suspicion that someone might be inside and has the girls return home. That evening, both families enjoy Thanksgiving dinner, and afterward, Anna and Joy ask to fetch Anna's red whistle from home, but Franklin adds a condition and asks them to sing along while he plays. Desperate, the girls sing the Jingle Bells improv, which throws shade at Batman and the Halloween villain, Joker. Hoping to stop the menacing sing-along, Grace allows them to go, provided Ralph and Eliza accompany them. Afterwards, the adults continue having fun, and Franklin inquires about Keller's song request. Shortly after, he plays the song Grace suggests is her husband's favorite. Later that day, Keller walks in on Ralph, who's watching TV with Eliza, and asks about the girls. However, the girls didn't tell their older siblings before leaving, so Keller decides to check his own house. Following that, Keller rushes back to his home and searches the entire place, down to the basement. But there's no trace of the girls. Panic spreads when Keller and Franklin realize the girls never returned. But Ralph recalls the strange RV he had stopped Anna from messing with earlier. Without wasting a second, the men barge outside in the thundering rain to search for their daughters, and Ralph leads his dad to the place where they encountered the RV, but it's nowhere to be found. Left with no other option, Keller calls the cops. Detective Loki, a dedicated but weary officer, is assigned to the case while he enjoys his dinner in a restaurant. That night, the police discover the RV's location and surround it. Just then, Loki arrives and gets out of his car to investigate. However, contrary to the police orders, the driver revs the engine and tries to escape, but he drives straight into a tree. After the mysterious crash, Loki and his partners confirm the van's status and detain the driver. Loki then orders the officers to seal the area and search the woods. On returning to the precinct, Loki interrogates the driver to get information on the missing girls, while some detectives search his RV for evidence. The lad, whose name is Alex Jones, claims to know nothing about them, and presumably, his aunt lets him park his van in her backyard. Following that, Loki goes to Alex's aunt's place to investigate, and she finds him checking out a vehicle that belonged to her husband. After clarifying his reason for trespassing, Alex's aunt, Holly, brings Loki in and answers his questions. She reveals that he's a good lad and shows him Alex's room, but Loki stumbles on a picture. Apparently, the man is her husband who left to buy milk and never returned, as they had disagreed. Based on Loki's request, Holly discloses information on Alex's deceased parents, which only plummets the mood in the room.
What do you got?
Meanwhile, the detectives confirm that the RV is clean, and after contemplating, Loki decides to check the woods, but asks the detectives to check Holly's place for any leads. That night, the search party enters the woods, and, hoping to get a reply, Keller, who tagged along, shouts his daughter's name. The following day, Loki visits Franklin's home to obtain clearer pictures of joy from her dejected mother. Not long after, he goes to Keller's place, but out of despair, Grace inquires about the truth test they took. Not wanting to accept reality, she suggests the girls ran away, but is clueless about the reason. While this goes on, Keller enters, and Loki reveals why Alex is probably not the culprit. Alex has the IQ of a 10-year-old, but Keller asks why someone like that drives a van. Just then, Keller lashes out, but Loki calms the frustrated father and leaves after their conversation. Before he drives off, Keller rushes over and asks him to keep Alex in custody till the girls are found. Revealing how police procedures work, Loki tries to avoid it, but Keller pesters him to do it. Back in the precinct, Loki tells his boss about Keller's request, but he dismisses the idea. Disappointed with Loki's progress, the boss insults him, but Loki reveals his next line of action, which is to investigate people with criminal records on the block. Moments later, Loki continues the investigation, and at night, he goes to a priest's home. After knocking without any response, he looks through the window and sees him lying lifeless on the ground. Instantly, he breaks in, but discovers that the drunkard is fast asleep. Loki then looks around the house and stumbles upon a bunker, which leads him into a dark basement. He looks around the ominous room and discovers a rotten corpse that was tortured before death. In the aftermath, Loki questions the drunk priest, and he unveils the culprit who came to him for a confession. Presumably, the psychopath has popped the clogs of 16 children and still intends to send more to the Maker. The following day, Keller leaves Ralph and Franklin with the search party in the woods, and zooms off after Grace calls to inform him about the suspect's release. Meanwhile, Loki watches closely as Alex fills out a form while his aunt encourages him. Afterwards, they leave the precinct and encounter journalists who bombard Alex with questions, but his aunt helps him escape them. Just then, Keller arrives and goes over to assault Alex, demanding answers. But in that moment, Alex tells him subtly that the girls didn't make a sound until he left them. Before he could get more details, police officers grabbed him from Alex and detained him.
Move back! Please, just let us go.
Shortly after, the police boss reveals why he's letting Keller go based on his dad's previous contributions. But the troubled dad reveals what the lad said to him. Loki enters, and the boss refers Keller to him, but the detective finds it hard to believe him. Furious, Keller leaves, and Loki blames his boss for releasing Alex, despite his request. A while later, Loki goes to Holly's place to inquire about what Alex said to Keller during the incident earlier, but the dullard claims he didn't say anything. Holly affirms it, but Loki asks her to give them some privacy. After she leaves, Loki confirms Alex's love for Holly, and reveals that she might suffer if he's not truthful, approaching the conversation as if he's speaking to a 10-year-old. As soon as he leaves, Loki calls Keller to tell him about Alex's innocence, but Keller furiously cuts him off. However, Ralph tries to console his sobbing mother and leaves after his dad enters.
Can't you make her go? Oh.
Seeing her sorrowful state, Keller gives her some sleeping pills, but she rejects them and laments because he failed to protect them even after his promises. Soon after, Keller tells Ralph to watch his mom and encourages him to be brave before leaving. As he starts his vehicle, a radio sermon begins to play, and he drives off. Later in the evening, Keller parks his truck close to Holly's house and stalks them till nighttime. A couple of hours later, Alex takes his dog on a walk, but unfortunately for him, Keller hears him sing the Jingle Bells version that Anna and Joy sang on Thanksgiving Day. Instantly, Keller pulls out his Glock and confronts Alex. The following day, Keller drives Franklin to a crappy building and asks if he brought extra clothes like he instructed, but Franklin is curious about the reason. To his surprise, Keller leads him to the room where he's holding Alex captive, and Franklin tries to dissuade him. However, Keller, who has made up his mind, declares his intention to torture the lad till he confesses, and asks Franklin to decide because the lives of their daughters are on the line. Following that, Keller asks for Franklin's help and calmly warns Alex to cooperate. Lost for words, Franklin joins his cause, and Alex's nightmare begins. Elsewhere, Loki reveals his intention to track the owners of the house, where Alex's van was parked during the time of the girl's disappearance, and asks the other detective on the call if they have information on the corpse he found in the priest's basement. After receiving no helpful info, he continues his research and stumbles upon the blog of Conyers boy's disappearance. A while later, Loki drives into someone's yard and meets a woman who shows him an old tape of a young lad playing around. She guesses that the same person who took him abducted the girls and briefs Loki about how her son, Barry, disappeared on the 19th of August, 26 years ago, without any evidence. Not long after, Loki returns to question the priest since Detective Kamelinski claims he's ready to talk. Thereafter, the priest reveals how the culprit, who is waging war against God, kidnaps multiple children in broad daylight. However, the useless information pisses Loki off, and he leaves. On the other hand, Keller beats the crap out of Alex and demands his daughter's location, but the lad is tight-lipped. Frustrated,
Get him up.
Keller threatens him with a hammer and crashes out after the futile efforts. That night, Franklin returns home and meets people holding a candlelight event for his missing daughter. Devastated, he hugs Nancy and Eliza, while Loki watches the heart-wrenching event. However, Loki notices a suspicious person there and follows him as he leaves. From nowhere, the dude flash steps a mile away, and Loki chases after him. Shortly after, he enters someone's yard, looking for the dude's traces, but he drops down from a tree, hoping to disarm Loki. Fortunately, he fails, zooms off to the main road, and Loki loses track of him. Meanwhile, Franklin hears about and sees the sketch of another suspect on the news. The following day, Franklin dissuades Keller from the route he's going, but Keller holds strong to his beliefs, suggesting that Alex left the girls with someone. At the precinct, Loki barges in to confront his boss for not putting Alex on surveillance since he's missing. But there's no budget for such things. Hoping that he'd be more helpful, Loki asks him to keep him posted about the location of all the parties involved in the case. Afterwards, he leaves to watch footage of his interrogation session with Alex, and shortly after, an officer tells him about his call. Moments after, Loki goes to a store where the cash-out lady whistleblows the suspect's patronage after recognizing the sketch on the news. Loki then asks about his purchases and mode of payment, and gives her his card so they can keep in touch. On the other hand, Franklin changes his clothes and leaves after the unfruitful interrogation. Contrary to his mindset, Keller gives a pessimistic reply, and Franklin decides to keep in touch after his wife sleeps. Upon arriving home, Nancy asks about his whereabouts all this time, and the wimp immediately folds. Thereafter, she follows him to Keller's house to inquire what was running through his mind. But Keller asks if the snitch didn't tell any other person. However, Nancy decides to meet Alex, and upon arrival, she meets him privately and tries the emotional manipulation tactic often employed by women. After releasing his hands on request, Alex knocks her away and tries to escape through the window, but luckily for her, the other men quickly come in to incapacitate him. Fortunately, Keller escaped a stab attack, which slightly scratched his chest, and proceeded to make preparations so it wouldn't happen again. The following day,
Say anything new?
He will soon.
Keller shows Franklin and Nancy the modifications he made to the holding room, since any further beating would end the lad. Franklin questions his humanity, but Keller still decides to trust his gut. Seeing that no one's on his side, he gives Franklin free rein to determine what happens to Alex and walks away. But Nancy changes Franklin's mind midway. That night, someone secretly sneaks into Franklin's house while Eliza, who's on a call with Ralph, bathes. Moments later, Franklin pulls up in the driveway, and Nancy decides that they aren't Keller's accomplices anymore. She enters the house, but the silence restores her trauma. She and Franklin struggle with Eliza's door, but after a short while, the teenager opens the door and lashes out because they left her by herself. However, the mysterious dude infiltrates Keller's home, and Grace jolts awake on hearing the silent footsteps. Hoping that it's Anna, she rushes to her room, but sees the open window. Just then, Ralph comes in and calms his delusional mother down. Not long after, Grace narrates the incident to Loki, but she's disappointed because he took it with levity. She then takes him to the basement, filled with emergency supplies, but Loki asks for her husband's whereabouts. She reveals that he's out helping the police and searching for their daughter. The following morning, Loki stalks Keller and follows him as he drives off. Moments later, Keller arrives at his destination, but thankfully, he notices that he's being followed and enters a liquor store instead. Shortly after, he comes to confront Loki and enters the car for a conversation. Loki then asks for his intended destination, but Keller makes something up. However, Loki discloses that Alex is missing and questions him about the things in his basement, but Keller plays along just fine. Seeing how adamant he is, Keller crashes out because of the dilemma and tells Loki to stop following. Intoxicated, he still rejects Loki's offer to drive and walks back home on foot. As soon as he reaches home, he sleeps off, but jolts awake after dreaming of Anna. Back in the precinct, Loki reads blogs and stumbles on someone's strange suicide information related to Keller's dad. Keller, on the other hand, returns to check on Alex and tortures him by switching on the tap, which releases water on his injuries. Alex whimpers in pain and reveals that someone never returned and he just wanted to play. But Keller, who doesn't understand whatever he's saying, threatens him to clarify what he's saying. Unable to keep up with the brutality, Keller falls to his knees and prays for forgiveness, but soon discovers Loki's arrival and panics. Instantly, he tells Alex to stay quiet while Loki infiltrates the crappy building through a window. As soon as he enters, he sees the coy Keller lying there with empty alcohol bottles and inquires why he's there. Hearing the absurd reasons, he asks Keller for a tour of the building that his father handed to him, and he cooperates. Loki comes close to busting him, but thankfully, the checkout girl from the store calls to inform him about the culprit. Loki gets his plate number from her and asks Keller to go home as he leaves. Not long after, Loki traces the culprit's car to a house.
Hi.
And he meets the dude named Bob. Loki then bombards him with questions, but Bob beats around the bush with his wimpy replies. Unable to handle the pressure, Bob tries to shut the door, but Loki barges in, gives him a well-deserved schooling, and detains him. He then searches the house and discovers a room filled with sealed boxes. Soon after, he puts Bob in his car and gets a crowbar to break the padlocks. He opens the boxes one by one, but they contain snakes covered with blood-stained children's clothes. He then sees some documents in the last box and leaves the snake-infested house. Later, Loki calls the parents of the missing girls to the station to show them some photographs, but Nancy and Franklin leave in despair. Loki then calls Keller to his office next, but sees that his wife's not with him. After Keller discloses the plausible reason, Loki updates him about Bob's confession. Hoping that he lied, Loki reveals that Bob had the girls sleep with the fishes, but they haven't found the bodies. However, the other couple recognized some of the clothes, and Loki asks Keller to check if he can identify any of them. Following that, he cries after discovering her blood-stained sock, and blames Loki for wasting time stalking him instead of the culprit. Later that day, Keller sees some journalists and tells Ralph to stay put, but soon realizes that he knows of the girl's death. Hoping it doesn't reach Grace, Keller tells him to keep it hidden, but he accuses his father of drinking instead. Furious, Keller releases some pent-up stress on him and claims he's not giving up on Anna. Meanwhile, Loki and his boss watch Bob draw mazes all day without any useful information. After Loki's frustration seeps out, the boss asks him to keep him posted and leaves. After watching for a while, Loki returns to question Bob, but slams his head into the table when he doesn't reply, as if he's scared of something. Instantly, two officers rush in to stop him from hurting the suspect, but Bob grabs one of their guns and ends his own life. Coincidentally, Alex watches Keller recite the Lord's Prayer while officers move Bob's corpse out. The boss shows Bob's doodles to Loki and demands an explanation, but he's absolutely useless. However, Keller pours out his feelings, and Alex discloses that the girls are in a maze, but Keller's curiosity makes him lash out at Alex, since he became tight-lipped after. A while later, Keller goes to Alex's aunt and apologizes while blaming himself for allegedly making her nephew run away. Soon after, she invites him in and tells him about her devout days with her husband. Unfortunately, his perception of things changed after their son died of cancer, which is why they adopted Alex. Seeing how exhausted he looks, she asks why, and Keller reveals he hasn't been sleeping much because he sees himself lost in mazes. The aunt waffles on, and Keller discovers Alex had an accident because his uncle kept snakes as pets. What soon caught his surprise was that Bob committed suicide, but Alex's aunt thought he already knew. At the precinct, Loki fails to decipher the maze, and his boss encourages him. However, on returning to his seat, he crashes out and breaks stuff. Soon after, he stumbles upon a picture of a necklace with a design that resembles Bob's incomplete maze, and immediately compares them. Just then, Detective Rich calls him over to Bob's house to show all the evidence his team discovered. From the buried mannequins filled with pig blood in the yard to the other things inside the house, Rich suggests that Bob was imitating the life of someone from a novel, but Loki's not having it. Not long after, Loki discovers the larger maze on the wall, which is incomplete, and tells Rich the conspiracy theory that is coming together. Still, Rich can't reconcile everything he has listed and decides to keep investigating. Rich's reference to windows and doors jolts his memory, and he quickly checks his jotter and bolts off to a house where he discovers Anna's other sock beneath the flowers close to a window. Days later, Joy is found alive, but traumatized. In the hospital, she mutters that Keller was there, confusing Loki and the parents. Keller realizes what she meant since she claims to have seen him at the house where the girls were held. He evades the cops and rushes to Holly's home, seeking answers. Holly calmly lets him in, offers him a drink, and suddenly pulls a gun.
Something to make you more manageable.
She forces Keller into her backyard and reveals a hidden pit beneath an old car. When Keller refuses to comply, she shoots him in the leg and forces him into the hole, trapping him underground. As Loki investigates further, he visits Holly's house. Inside, he finds evidence linking her to the crimes and hears noises upstairs. He discovers Holly attempting to drug Anna, and a gunfight ensues. Loki sends Holly to the Maker, but is wounded in the process. He rescues Anna and roughly drives her to the hospital just in time. Days later, Loki reads the newspaper after getting better and sees that Keller's still missing. Grace brings Anna in to greet her hero, along with Nancy and Joy. After, she stays behind to speak with Loki, and he inquires about the whistle around Anna's neck. Presumably, Grace got her another, because she kept insisting that Joy found it for her. Contrary to her thoughts, Loki believes that Keller hasn't contacted her since the incident, and she confirms his fate if he's ever found. She hopes he's found and turns to leave, but bursts into tears because she misses him. Later, as the police search Holly's property, they pack up for the night, but Loki, who's still standing in the cold, hears a faint whistling sound, but can't wrap his head around its source. Thank you for sticking to the end of my video. Please do me the biggest favor by leaving a like, comment, and subscribe. And I hope to see you in the next video.